I am super, super grateful to be sitting here with Erin, and I hope you guys can stay later. She's sending her pros to help you learn about confidence through poker down in our bog. But we're going to roll right through. There's water and snacks outside if anybody's hungry, but we are going to jump right into a conversation, and Erin also has a presentation for you for a little bit later. All right. So for our students and entrepreneurs and women in the room, can you please share your journey and just tell us a bit about the key decisions that led you to where you are today?
I can do this.
Awesome.
So I always start by saying that I say yes to everything, especially the things that I don't know how to do. And usually that works out. And that really is the theme of my life. Is I have not lived a logical, linear, well-planned life. Now, when I was 18 and 20 and 22, I absolutely thought that I was actually going to be an editor. I was going to be an editor eventually, but I was going to work in publishing. I liked to write. And my first job was as an editorial assistant here in Chicago. Like Amanda, I grew up on the East Coast, went to an East Coast school, and followed a boy to Chicago. That's how I ended up out here. And what was interesting in that very first job, which was my dream job when I was 22, and you have to remember, this is 1992, so there weren't a lot of jobs in the publishing industry, and I'd actually picked the wrong city, because people who want to go into publishing actually moved to New York, but I was out here. And I felt like I had received the only job offer that there was. I said yes immediately, and they paid me $16,000, not 60, 16. It was less than my tuition to go to college. And I had no idea how I was going to make it in a little teeny apartment just north of Lincoln Park. But pretty soon after taking that first job, I realized that this was nothing that I wanted to do. Because unlike my imagination, where I'd be working closely with authors and we'd be doing book readings and we'd be publishing and having all that excitement, what I really was doing is I had a red pen, and you have to remember this is pre every kind of device that you all have, this is pre all of that. I had a red pen, and I would be given pages of a manuscript, and I was correcting for grammar and spelling. And it was about as dull and miserable as I could ever imagine. What happened next, because I really didn't have a plan on how to get out of that job, because I really did need to pay rent, is that I was asked to babysit. Now, any of the women in the room who are now, young 20s and asked to babysit, we tend to not really want to do that anymore. But the person who asked me was actually the dad of the children, and he said, "You'd really be helping us out." I didn't really know him very well. I didn't know the children or the wife at all. And he said, "We have this charity event. We have to go to it. Can you just come? The kids will already be in bed, I promise." So I said yes, because I say yes to everything. And I said yes because I thought, when I looked at the address, well, that's a really nice building, and they're going to have really good food in the pantry, better than what I have, certainly, in my cupboard. So I say yes, and I go, and I end up meeting the mom. And the mom turns out to be one of the most well-connected women in Chicago. And the charity that she is the head of is the Lynn Sage Breast Cancer Foundation at Northwestern. And she puts me into a position shortly after I meet her of saying, "No, you shouldn't be correcting manuscripts with red pens. You should be raising money for breast cancer." Now, there is no breast cancer in my family. I wasn't personally connected to it, but I was absolutely excited about working with this woman. Literally anything she had asked me to do, I probably would have continued to say yes to, because she epitomized what I thought someday, maybe, I could become. And so Joan put me into a position at Northwestern that I didn't have the background for at all. And my main job was to ask very wealthy people in Chicago for money. And I didn't know it, but that is one of my secret skill sets, is I am very, very good at asking people for money. And that's what I did for 5 years. And through the course of my time there, I was promoted to run the foundation and ask lots of people for lots of money for lots of different healthcare programs and research and initiatives at Northwestern. And then Joan came to me, I was 26, she came to me and she said, "You need to do something else, it's time." And I didn't feel it was time. I was really having a great time. I was building a team, we were very successful. And I always say, I had a Rolodex back when I was 25, I had a Rolodex that was better than many of the CEOs in Chicago because they were all in my Rolodex and they would pick up the phone when I called. And Joe said, nope, it's time to move on. You're going to business school. And so in my mind, I said, okay, I'm going to business school because I'm going to stay in healthcare. I really love healthcare now. And I'm going to go into healthcare management. And that made sense to me. And one of the best programs for that is at Northwestern, at Kellogg. And I said, okay, I'll apply to one school, one program. If I get in, it's meant to be. If I don't, I get to stay here and do what I really know how to do and I'm very happy doing. But I got in. And so when I was 27 years old, I moved to Evanston and I started at Kellogg. And as soon as I got to Kellogg, I started to meet people. I had never met people like these people before. These people, now this is 1997, so these people had visions of going to Wall Street. They had visions of going to Silicon Valley, a place I had never even heard of. They had these visions and ambitions of what they could do with their lives after they got their MBA degree. And so the light bulbs start to continue. I'm always a little bit dense and a little bit slow, but it starts to click. And I said, maybe I don't want to stay in healthcare. Maybe there's something else I can do. And I decided I'm going to go into consulting. Like all my friends that I had made at Kellogg, they were all going into consulting for their summer internship. And so I started applying for consulting roles. Again, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to do the case studies that you have to do in those interviews. And I was an utter failure at those case studies because I hadn't really prepped and I didn't really have the right network in place to help me prepare for them. But I did get one interview that flew me to New York, which was a really big deal because I was in round 2. And I remember this so well, is that it was very much like this. We were sitting in a suite at one of the fancy hotels, and the man interviewing me was British, and he had the most lovely accent, and he makes a little bit of small talk, and then he opens up The Economist magazine, and he turns to a page, and on the page there's a photograph of what looks like maybe it's wheat, maybe it's some sort of agricultural product that's piling up. It's like a great big mountain of whatever commodity this is. And he just shows me the picture really quickly, and then he closes the magazine, and he says, Erin, why is that pile sitting there? Now, I had really practiced, and I was really nervous, but I was also really excited because I thought, maybe this is my chance. And I did a whole hypothesis about the part of the world where this pile of material was. Maybe it was really windy there, and the material is piling up because it's a wind shelter. Dead silence in this room. And then he starts to laugh. But he laughs in that uncomfortable way that you know that they're laughing at you and not with you. And he said, you're joking, right? And that was that moment where I'm like, I don't have a plan B answer here. That was my very best shot to answer this question. And he says, Erin, does Kellogg teach supply and demand? Okay. I was out the door immediately after that. So I did not become a consultant. I did not become an editor at a publishing house. I did not become the top fundraiser in Chicago. What I became is a banker. And I ended up on Wall Street because friends of mine at Kellogg, when I came back from those failed interviews for consulting, said, almost no women go to Wall Street. It's 1998. You should go there. And again, I said yes. Now, this one I was really good at. I was good at it because what my job was at JP Morgan was to ask rich people for money. And I knew how to do that. And help them sell their companies, and help them acquire other companies, and help them plan for their financial futures, and more importantly, their legacies and for their children. And I loved my job at JP Morgan. And I was in New York, and then I was here in Chicago. And the only reason I'm not sitting there today is that I had 2 children. And back in the early 2000s, if you were a woman in banking who traveled 3 or 4 days a week, and you decided you were ready to have children, I was 35 when I had my first one, nobody had photos of their children on their desks. Nobody left at 3 o'clock to pick up kids from school. Nobody ever said no to staying late or going on a trip for work because you had kids. And what I started to realize is that I was crying at home, I was crying on the plane, I was crying in the hotel room, I was crying almost everywhere because I couldn't do it all. And I really had envisioned myself, at this point in my life, I'm 35, and I thought I was going to have it all. Whatever that it all was, I was going to have it. And what I ended up doing instead is I took a pause. And the pause felt like a fatal ending. It really did, because I had no plan B again. I thought I was going to be in banking the rest of my life. And I paused for 8 years. Now, I will tell you, for every year that a woman is out of the workforce and at home with her children, she is holding back her salary increases. She's holding back her bonus increases significantly. My 8-year pause, if you just did the math, should have put me behind by about 80% of where my peer group would be. I didn't know that at the time. Now, so how? Because today, I run a poker company. How did I go from poker? How did I get to poker? From all of these stories of somewhat success and plenty of failure, is that again, I said yes. And what I said yes to this time was to run a company that would teach women and girls how to think and strategize and take risk like a winning poker player. But I didn't know how to play. And I'll stop there soon.
Thank you. That's fantastic. The second part to that question is about life lessons that you might have learned that you might want to share with some of our students in our audience.
Yeah, you know, it's that say yes is truly the most important lesson, but I think it's deeper than that, because we can say yes and hear a lot of no's, and it cannot work out. And after the yes, what's so important is the resilience and the persistence. And when I think back to 1992, when I was applying for that editorial assistant position, the test for that job is that you had to proofread a manuscript. Should have been the red flag to me right there. You had to proofread a manuscript and give it back to the editor and the owner of the company. And I didn't catch a misspelling of the word there, T-H-E-R-E, and I believe it was spelled T-H-E-I-R. And I missed it, I was proofreading. And when she did my exit interview, she just circled the word, and she said, "You didn't catch this one." And she was a very, very serious person. And what I did that night is I went home to my apartment, and I got a yellow lined piece of paper from a legal pad, and I wrote the correct spelling of there 100 times. Because that's the way I was taught how to spell, is that when I was in 3rd grade, we had to write the words 100 times in a row so that we could see them, we could hear them, we knew how to spell them. And I sent the note, my thank you note, with that yellow lined piece of paper with the correct spelling. And I said, I don't often make mistakes, but when I do, I always learn from them. And that's how I got that job. And I am certain, had I not done what I did, not been persistent, not been resilient, I don't know what I would be doing today. I certainly wouldn't be sitting on this stage, that's for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And can you tell us a little bit more about Poker Power and how that journey came about for you?
Yeah, so Poker Power began as an idea, and it was launched because of a poorly played tennis match that happened on the North Shore of Chicago. And so our founder's daughter was playing tennis, she was 14, and her dad was spectating the match and was getting very frustrated because she was playing so poorly. In fact, she lost the match. And so when he came home and he walked through the kitchen, his wife, Jenny, was sitting in the kitchen, and he walked by her and he said, "Juliet should learn to play poker." Now, there's not a lot of companies that get launched and founded on the words, "Juliet should learn to play poker." But what happened is that when Jenny heard those words, she said, "Should I really teach my 14-year-old to play poker?" And it sounded very strange to her. And the daughter is the 4th child in that family. There are 3 older sons who all know how to play poker. Because somehow, boys, somewhere between the ages of 10 and 15, I think it's by osmosis, you just learn how to play this game. It's really mostly at summer camp and, the uncle who takes you down to the basement to teach you the game. But boys grow up playing. They don't even remember how they learned. Girls are never included at that table. So Jenny actually hired a 3rd grade Chicago public school teacher to teach Juliet and a few of her girlfriends how to play poker. And honestly, had the pandemic not happened, I'm not sure this would be where it is today. But what did happen is I said yes to helping Jenny 3 weeks before the pandemic. But I said, I think teaching poker to 14-year-olds is a really stupid idea. And I've known Jenny for 25 years, so I can tell her when I think she has stupid ideas. And the reason I said that was because I was surrounded by poker when I was at JP Morgan. It's just endemic. And I had never sat at the table, and I had never wanted to sit at the table, and I'd never felt invited to sit at the table. And I said, okay, if we're going to actually teach poker, we should be teaching it to adult women. This should be in the workplace. This is a professional development skill. The way that you're talking about it, the way I'm hearing it, this is a professional skill. Because if we keep knocking on doors and knocking on schools and saying, can we teach our 14-year-olds to play poker, we're probably not going to build a very big company. And Jenny, in her wisdom, said, figure it out, see what you want to do. That was 3 weeks before the pandemic. And as we all recall, the lockdown occurs. Everything that you're doing in person in work, you think is the way you will continue. You think it will come back. Maybe in just a few weeks, we'll go back to normal. And of course, we didn't. But that was really the perfect storm for Poker Power because we were able to pivot and become an online business. And not only online, but we could scale. And we could scale across the globe. Because as soon as we decided we were focusing on women in the workplace, suddenly what we realized is that every company on the planet was trying to get their employees to turn on their screens and interact. And even better, get your clients and your employees to get on a screen together and interact. And what we very quickly built over about 3 months' time was a virtual curriculum to teach women how to think and strategize and negotiate like a poker player by using Texas Hold'em. In the early days, we were using someone else's app. We had a third-party app. We have since built our own, so we have the only gender-neutral poker app in the marketplace. It is a teaching tool. There is no money that transacts. There is no gambling with anything that Poker Power does. And we now have 230 corporate clients. We work with lots of higher ed institutions. And getting back to the mission, we also work with a lot of high school girls now. So we're very, very proud of that.
That is absolutely fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey with poker and the parallels with the finance industry that you found?
Yeah. So as I said, I was not a poker player. And in fact, I had many of the stereotypes of the game that lots of women have. We don't know why would we spend any of our free time playing this game? Because our vision of the game is either from a Hollywood movie where it's very opulent, it's James Bond, or it's a seedy, smelly, gross basement. And we also don't want to go down there. And that was really the mindset that I brought to the game. Once I started taking our classes, and at the time, they were all virtual. Actually, my very first teacher, her name is Tammy, and she is coming this evening. She is a fantastic poker professional, and she will teach any of you who would like to stay and learn. But Tammy was very patient, and she taught me how to play this game. And I knew that I couldn't be credible running this company because most of our employees in the early days, they were all professional poker players. And I will tell you something about women who play this game for a living are the brightest, hardest working, most resilient women I have ever met. They are absolutely blow me out of the water in any scenario. So I was actually incredibly intimidated by women I was interviewing over a Zoom screen to hire to build this company. But through their help and really their grace, I learned to play the game. And today, I play a lot of poker. I play certainly in our own app. I also play for real money when I go and take trips to Vegas or other places. And the reason I think it's so important that I am playing is I don't ever want to lose sight of the reasons why I initially thought this wasn't a good idea for a business. And I don't want to lose sight of our community. Because our community is made up almost exclusively of women, women plus, non-binary, transgender. And they have the same trepidation and the same hesitations that I felt 4 years ago. They have those as they sit down at the table. It really doesn't matter if you're an intern or you're the CEO. You are going to feel like you don't belong at a poker table. And what we have been able to build is an inclusive, empowering environment where there are no dumb questions. You don't have to know how to play any kind of card game to learn with us. We are just going to take the strategy of the game, and we're going to translate it to the real world.
Oh, that flows perfectly to the next question. So as you are teaching, how do you translate the leadership skills through poker?
Yeah, so we really have two sides to the business now. We have our virtual business that we launched in the pandemic. That's a series of 12 one-hour lessons. Half of that lesson time is actually teaching. So you're on the Zoom screen, your teacher's there, the other participants in the class are there, and you're learning a poker lesson. And our lessons are very bite-sized, they're very digestible. One of the things we learned early on is that poker is exceptionally complex. It truly takes a lifetime to learn the game. And if I throw everything at you on day 1 and day 2, you're going to be overwhelmed and you're not going to come back. And I agree with that. It was too much for me in the early days. And so we made a very manageable curriculum. And every one of our lessons is tied to a leadership skill. So the first one is courage. It takes a lot of courage to sit at a poker table, but it also takes a lot of courage to be a woman in the workforce who is ambitious and wants to advance. The second lesson is bold. Bold moves in poker are winning moves, but they're not necessarily instinctual, and especially with our demographic. It is much easier to fold at a poker table if you don't know the right move to make versus to shove all your chips in, and that's a really aggressive move when you go all in. At Poker Power, one of the things we practice over and over are those aggressive moves, because we know if we can get you comfortable doing that in gameplay, you're going to be more comfortable doing it in the real world. As we go through our lessons, we keep having these themes that are part of each of the weekly instruction. If you don't want to learn with us virtually, there are also now lots of opportunities to learn in person. And actually, several people who are here today have seen us in person and experienced it. And those are just phenomenal opportunities to sit at tables with other novices and learn this game together. Because I think one of the things that women don't ever realize about poker, and guys know this, is that it is social and it is fun. And instead of saying it's too much math, or I don't fit at this table, or I don't see anyone who looks like me at this table, if you focus on it's social and it's fun and it's a game, it makes it a much more inviting space. And so our in real life experiences are all around making community and making this feel accessible. When we are teaching poker, and people ask, as April did, what are some of the most obvious lessons or the lessons that translate so well? I always talk about negotiation, because one, the word woman and negotiation usually is in the same sentence together, and usually we're being told we don't know how to do it, or we don't do it enough, or we aren't being successful at it. And I really disagree with that. I think one of the reasons that women have a perception, and it gets really enhanced by the media, is that we don't practice negotiation. And if you think back to being a child on the playground, typically the girls are on the swings and they're on the slide. And they're hanging out with their friends. They're not doing things that are competitive. They're not kicking a ball around. They're actually behaving very calmly and nicely on the playground. And if you look to the other side of the playground, you'll see all the boys. And they either are playing with a ball, they are kicking, they are pushing, they are creating a structure of dominance when they're 6 and 8 and 10 years old. And that's institutionalized. That's just biased in America, and I'm sure it's this way in other places as well. But that's how children grow up. And so you take little girls that have, for most of their lives, been told, play nicely, behave, don't cause any issues. And then you suddenly say to them, oh, but year 1 in the workforce, we expect you to walk into your boss and ask for 10% more than what you're being paid. And you should just go and do that. You should know how to do that. And we don't know how to do it. We haven't had to put value behind our ask. And one of the things that we emphasize at Poker Power is understanding the value of your chips as your decision making. So you can maneuver these chips at a table to tell me how strong or how weak your hand is. And one of the very best things about poker, and one of the reasons why it will never be perfectly solved as a game, is because of bluffing. And it is played by humans. And that translates better than anything to the real world. Because when you are in a real life negotiation, when you are in a situation of conflict, bluffing is part of that experience. And if you don't know how to do it and do it with a lot of confidence, you're not going to be as successful as the person who does.
Fantastic, thank you. And I highly recommend everybody look for Erin for her TED Talk. Yeah. I was going to ask you next about your TED Talk and closing the gender gap in finance.
So I have a TEDx that I did in going to lose track here. 2000 and it doesn't matter. I had to think when everything is like pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. So it's 2019. And the TED Talk is all about equal pay. And the reason I did a TED Talk on equal pay is that after my first year at JP Morgan, everyone at my level would receive a bonus. And that bonus is multiples of your salary. So it's a really important part of your compensation package. And when I received my bonus, my boss told me my number. I was overwhelmed by the size of that number, because you have to remember, year one I made $16,000. I could definitely afford my rent now. And I stood up and I shook his hand and I said, thank you, I am so grateful, I love it here. Something like that, just something really polite, really, really nice. And I walked out of the office. Everyone else walked in, got their bonuses. And this is at a time when the pay secrecy laws on Wall Street, there are still some, but they were really enforced. You were not to talk about your pay. There was not pay transparency. However, when you're a first year, you tend to go out, when you finally get done at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you tend to go out and hang out with your other colleagues, which is what we did that night. And through the course of the evening, and a little bit of alcohol, people started sharing what their numbers were. And when I found out that a man in my office who had similar education, similar book of business, similar sort of things that he did extra in the office, we were basic carbon copies of each other. And he received 25% more than I received. And this wasn't a few $100s. This was thousands of dollars. And when he told me the number, the very first thing I said was, well, how did you get that? And he responded, I asked. And what I hadn't realized is that I was supposed to have asked for more. Even though I was grateful, even though I didn't even cross my mind that you could do that, everybody else was going in there and asking for more. Now, it was an incredibly painful experience, painful in the pocketbook for sure, but it was a painful experience is, again, I felt like I was ignorant. I felt like I didn't belong because no one had shared that message with me. I am so grateful that happened because I was 29 years old. And had that not happened at that part of my life, I don't know that I would have started asking for more. I needed to have a very tangible negative experience to understand that no matter what your situation is, where you are in work, what you are pursuing, you have to ask for more. And what follows asking for more is the word no. You're going to hear a lot of no's. So the more you ask, the more no's you get. You're not going to hear more yeses. You're going to hear more no's because you're asking more. And that's okay, because the way to think about the no's is that no just means not right now. It doesn't mean not ever. It doesn't mean you can't come back in 6 months and ask me again. And now that I run a team of all women, and I care very strongly about the equal pay message, I care very strongly about financial equity, I also run a startup. I don't have an endless budget. Not everybody can get raises every year. And so I say to everyone on my team, I still want you to ask. I want you to go through the exercise, prepare all your numbers, have all the reasons why you should be valued, and come and ask me. And guess what? I might be able to say yes, or I might be able to say yes to half of that, depending on how much you ask for. And that alone is a skill set. If you can learn that in your 20s, instead of in your 30s or your 40s, by the time you get to be my age, it's going to be second nature to be asking for more in every part of your life, from the relationships that you have, from the new jobs that you want to get, from what you expect of your children. Ask for more.
Thank you. So many of our students and our team here at Illinois Tech will be going into computer science and engineering and male-dominated fields that are right now male-dominated, I'll say. What advice do you have for them on communication and confidence?
So I think the numbers, I did a panel or a speech at AWS a couple months ago, and I remember saying to everyone in that audience, who were all women in tech, that about 25% of the employee base in tech is women. And obviously that's early. And as you start to go up in the ranks and get promotions, that number starts to shrink and shrink and shrink. And what I think, there are institutional problems. There are cultural issues. There are certainly biases within companies that don't enable women to progress the way that they should, because they're certainly capable, they're certainly confident, they're certainly confident. However, there's a saying, and you've all heard it, that if you don't see it, you can't be it. And because we are not seeing women who look like us in those upper roles, we might get to see one. And one is the most loneliest number of all, because that one has to hold on by the fingernails to keep that role. What we need is we need 2 that turns to 4 that turns to 8. And once we stop having 27% of the people in tech being women, and we start having 49, 50, 51%, then we're going to start normalizing women going into these fields. So that's number one, is we have to have more women pursuing this, and those who are in the leadership positions creating pathways of success for their younger colleagues. The second thing is, I know that often we talk about mentors, we talk about sponsors, and we talk about allies. And of those 3, what I like to say, what I say about mentors is that mentors will give you advice. They're very, very valuable. I've had incredible mentors throughout my career, but it's usually they are telling me how to do things differently or better. Sponsors are going to open the doors for you. They are going to say your name in that room of opportunities. And that's critical. You cannot move forward without someone else thinking that you're fantastic. However, the ally is the most important role, because the ally is the person who is going to make sure your voice gets heard. And the example I give of this is, and it may be familiar to you from being in class, or if any of you have started working, then you've been in a meeting, and you are talking, and you might even be a little bit nervous because you're talking about something you're not sure it's not going to come out exactly right, but you are talking, and you're really, really proud of yourself that you're talking in this meeting, and you get interrupted. And you get interrupted by a man who talks over you, or even worse, he takes the idea that you are now articulating and he runs with it. What the ally does right in that moment, it's not after the meeting, it's during that meeting, is the ally stops the meeting and says, Erin, you were interrupted. Please finish what you were saying. We want to hear it. And if that starts to become normal in your business or in your classroom, then more and more allies will start to use their voice to get your voice heard. And so I truly feel like all of us are in positions to be allies to others. It's not a gendered position. It is a position of recognizing that everyone in the room has words of value to share and needs to be able to be heard. And that's the ally's role, to help you do that.
That is so important. Our allies are our leverage to get to the next level. That leads right to the next question, actually. What advice would you give for risk-taking for women as we face these boardrooms and we face these community leadership roles? How do you think we could embrace risk better?
Yeah. So risk is hard. It's scary to be outside of your comfort zone. It's scary to ask for something you're not sure you're going to, hear a yes. You may hear a no. Day to day, we live risky lives. Everyone got up today. Everybody walked across the street today. Some of us got into vehicles to do so. Risk is part of our existence on this planet. But when you start to think about the risk that it takes to be heard, to ask for, a promotion, ask for a raise, ask to be considered for a role that maybe you don't have 10 of the qualifications, you only have 5 or 6 of those qualifications, how do you start to do that? And I don't revert everything back to poker, but this is one of the things I do speak about poker. Because when you play Texas Hold'em, every hand that you play is a risk. You don't know everyone else's cards. You don't know what future cards are going to come. And so you have to make a decision with every round of play. Am I going to raise, which means you're putting chips in the pot and you're still in the hand, or am I going to fold? And fold means you slide your cards on the table, you're out of the hand, no more risk is happening. And this is what's so fascinating when we are teaching girls and women to play poker, is that it will come to the moment in the game where they should shove their chips all in, which means everything they have in front of them, they're going to push that stack of chips to the middle of the table, and if they're right and they win, they get the whole pile of chips back, and if they're wrong and they lose, they have more chips in front of them. It is one of the best analogies of taking a risk with money or value or something that really matters to you. And it is truly a physical motion of pushing what you believe is the right decision to the middle of the table, and then waiting for the other cards to turn over and to see if you have been validated with your choice. When that happens in our games, and we have now taught over 35,000 women how to play, so we have a lot of data points. And what happens most typically as someone is first learning the game is they will say, okay, I'm going to shove, but can I just keep back 5 or 6 chips? So what are they really saying? They're really not putting everything on the line. They're really not taking the risk that we have asked them to take by being aggressive, because it feels safe. It's that rainy day fund. It's the money under the pillow fund. It makes us feel safe, and we don't want to actually put everything into the center of that table. That is a skill and a strategy that you have to practice through repetition, through honing, through losing all of your chips. Unfortunately, when you play with us, there is no money, and so we're going to just give you some more chips so you don't have to worry, so you get to practice again. But it is that repetitive process of making a risk analysis and then deciding, am I raising or am I folding? And I think if girls, and really anybody, grew up having to put value behind their decisions and their choices, and there was a consequence to it from a young age, and we normalized that, I think by the time you're 22 and you're 25, and you really are taking risks in your career and in your personal life that matter, you will be better capable of doing the analysis and making the best decision.
That's fantastic. And it's something my Uncle Ray, who is one of my mentors, always said, that each career move that he made, he went all in, and he didn't even think about the mortgage or the house or the kids, or he just went all in. And I think as women, we need to learn how to just go all in sometimes. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about, Uncle Ray's one of my mentors. I was going to ask about one of your mentors who has taught you lessons in life.
Yeah, who always comes to mind first is Joan, and she was the woman who ran the Lynn Sage Foundation here in Chicago. And really, I think I've been very fortunate in that there have been a series of people throughout my adult life that have believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I really do mean that. I've had imposter syndrome, I've felt, underqualified, underskilled, and it is so critical that you are creating relationships with people who are your biggest fan. And when you find that person who's your biggest fan, do not let them go. So much of what Amanda was saying, I absolutely loved all of her tips, but the one where you should be giving more than you're expecting to get, that is so critical to building your network of colleagues, of friends. It's the givers who always end up receiving the most. And I think, what Joan did for me is, one, she took a huge risk to put me in charge of her foundation, because I really didn't know what I was doing. It goes back to, it's just, you get a little bit lucky and then be able to figure it out. Like the favorite person, and I shouldn't probably pick favorites, but you do that sometimes when you run a startup, is actually the first employee at Poker Power. And the reason she is my favorite is because every year when I write the review, I say, Lauren gets shit done. And one of the most critical, valuable skills you can ever bring to the table is be the person who gets shit done. And what I mean by that is you figure it out, just as Amanda said, that you work really hard. You will do all the research. You will make the effort. You will take the initiative. Those are the people who get ahead. And those are the people that I want to mentor. Those are the types of people I want to help to create success in their lives. And I think mentorship is very circular. You can't just be on the receiving end of it. You have to give it back. And I have now mentored many, many women, primarily in male-dominated fields, because I feel like there is a high barrier there, and there are things that you can learn early on in your career that can help you be successful. And one of them is, finding that mentor, finding those allies. Another is, asking for more. And then thirdly, it's getting comfortable making the mistakes. When I look at all the mistakes we've made at Poker Power over the last 4 years, and there are many, many, we've learned from every one of them. Startups are fortunate is that by definition, we're supposed to screw up and hopefully get a little bit better each time we pivot and do something new. I absolutely love the startup environment because of that reason, is because you can make the mistakes, you don't blow through all your funding, hopefully, and you get to reinvent yourself and try again.
That is fantastic. And can you share a little bit about your mission-led company that maybe a testimony or two of what you're doing in the space for women, because you're doing so very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's truly remarkable because when you envision women playing poker, a lot of people say, well, why? And so first and foremost, I always have to remind anyone that this isn't for money. This is not about getting you into the casino. It's not even about getting you into, the smoky home game in the basement. It really isn't. It is truly to deliver a series of skills and strategies that you learn through gameplay, but then you start to apply to real life. And so we have women in our community who are so kind in telling us how it's impacted them, because one, it's very fulfilling when you run a startup because you work so hard and you're dealing with a lot of problems and a lot of mistakes, and then someone sends you an email about what learning poker did for them. And that's truly is what keeps us going every single day. And so, there are a few women, lots of women come to mind, but a few I will share with you is one is a woman, and she's a commercial real estate broker in LA. And I don't know if you have a lot of knowledge about real estate, the real estate market, but when you're in commercial real estate, it's a lot of really big companies that get most of the big deals. And so you've got some small players and you got these really big players. And she was a small player. And she wanted to start to bid on the big player deals. And she didn't feel like she had the courage or the competence or the network or really the ability to take the risk in putting herself out there. She went through our Poker Power courses, and she then went and she bid on one of those big boy jobs. And she got it. And the story that she wrote back to us was about not the getting, obviously she was really happy with that, but it was the change that had happened to her over the course of taking our classes, is that she started to have this feeling of confidence. Confidence comes first. Day one, when you sit at a poker table and you win a pot of chips, I can't really describe the adrenaline rush until you experience it yourself, because you never saw yourself doing this, and then you do it successfully. And then you do it repetitively, successfully. And so she spoke about the confidence. And then she spoke about that ability to see situations from another perspective. And one of the key things in poker is it's not really about the two cards that are in front of you. Those are called your hold cards. It's all about what everybody else could possibly have, because you don't actually know as you're playing the hand. So you are using probability, you are using body language, which is one of the things I'm going to teach in a little bit, and you're using everything that you can perceive at the table to decide what is the probability that that person has two cards that are better than my two cards. And she was speaking in the testimony, she was telling us how that ability to shift perspective and to reframe how she was negotiating and presenting herself was something she'd never learned before until she started to play poker. So that one was just very personally rewarding because it led to more money. And at the end of the day, a lot of what I do is around the language of money and around the power of money and wanting women to get into positions of having money and having access to money. And I think that another one that is related to this, and it's more personal, is a woman who went through our classes, and she was going through a divorce. And she decided to learn poker because she had read that it will help her be a better negotiator, which it can. And so she goes through our poker classes. She doesn't let the soon-to-be ex-husband know that she is doing this, and she then credits Poker Power with being able to negotiate a better settlement during her divorce. Now, that had an immediate personal, financial impact to her, but it also gave her, what we often hear from women in poker is, I never thought I could do this, which is so odd because we're so good at so many things, but we don't think we're so good at poker. And she did it, and then she was able to apply it directly to her life and to her success. I think this concept of being comfortable with money is something I would hope that each of you as you're starting careers will really focus on. Because day one, you're probably not going to own the P&L, and you're probably not going to be the CEO. However, no matter what your functional role is in a business, you can start to ask to be exposed to the money. And what I mean by that is ask to listen in. Because sometimes, more senior people, they really may not want your input because you don't know very much yet. But if someone says to me on my team, can I just listen in to the budget meeting? Can I just listen in or sit beside you while you're doing the financial plans for next year, and I can ask some questions as you're going through that? I want to learn. I will never say no to someone who wants to learn from me, especially if they want to learn around money and business. And the reason I think this is so critical, that you become fluent in the language of money within the working space, is that it gives you credibility. It gets you into a room that you might not be in otherwise. And the language of money is what drives business forward. At the end of the day, it really does come down to profits and to the revenues and to the success of that company. And if you can understand the balance sheet and you can understand how decisions get made, even if you're not impacting them yet, you are in a more powerful position to those who just say, oh, that's not me. I'm in marketing. I don't have to care about the budget. We all have to care about the budget.
That is so important, and shameless plug, our CFO is an amazing woman of color who her eyes light up when she talks about numbers. So for all of our students, please pay attention to your numbers. One of my best friends is here, and she knows I have failed that journey over and over, but I'm getting better in my life. So please pay attention to your taxes, to your salary negotiations. Ask for more. Men ask for more, and ask quickly. Men will take a job when they know 60% of what they claim that they need to know. Women wait till we know 90% of what they're asking us to know. So thank you very much for that. Then I've got one last question for you on this phase of what we're talking about, and it's Martin Luther King said, keep your eyes on the prize. And for you and your journey and the journey of your company, what is the prize and what are you excited about bringing to life in the future?
Our mission is 1 million women, but that isn't actually the mission. The mission is every person. And I start to think about how would this world be different if it wasn't 100 million people who play poker, which is about the estimate. What if it was every person knew how to think and negotiate and take risk like a poker player? And that is what the world ought to be. I truly do believe that. And I believe there is this game that can help you get better at it. That's motivating because as I mentioned, when you run a startup, you get, I problem solve all day long. I get those great testimonials and that's a really fun part of the job, but mostly I'm problem solving and I'm thinking about new ways to do things better. I'm thinking about how to make the budget go further. I'm thinking about the strategy for next year and what kind of products should we have that we don't have today. And I'm thinking a lot about people. I have a large team now. We have over 50 people, and each of them has lives, and each of them has things that are really important to them. And I feel very strongly that if my team is thriving, then I'm going to be doing great because they're doing great. But most importantly, our community is going to thrive because they are thriving. So I spend a lot of time caring about the individuals on the team. And when I think about what is next, because I know we're pretty good at teaching poker. At this point, we've kind of proven, we've got the proof points. It truly just isn't enough. I don't have enough of you thinking that this matters. And until we can really reframe the game and reframe the landscape of here's a very tangible way to teach and practice a skill that does lead to empowerment, that's what keeps me up at night, is how do I get everybody, not just 1 million. I'll be really happy when we get 1 million, but I know we're going to get to 1 million. I want to get the whole world.
That's fantastic. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
Do we have any questions from the audience? I think we have a few minutes. Oh, yes. There we go. Yeah, we'll repeat it. We'll repeat it.
Sarah, I just wanted to say thanks, Erin. I met Erin earlier this year, I would say March, one of the lunches she was doing with Tech Ride and Poultry, sponsoring a law firm. And so I went through the program, and I think it's amazing. So I just wanted to echo as a live, I guess, testimony
Thank you. We have to get that written down, Sarah. That was really great. Thank you.
Yes, we'll have to give you a mic for the video on that one. So just to recap, she's given a fantastic testimonial of what Erin's program has done for her. And she's looking forward to playing later on this evening. And thank you very much for sharing that. That's fantastic. Do we have any more questions? Ah, there we go. Oh, thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. I'm again Indu from Fruit Vaccine, and I'm from Champaign, not from here. I drove here because it's a women thing. It's not very common to have women stuff. So my question is, I didn't expect to ask questions about yes and no today, but again, it's about yes and no. So you said yes to almost everything, or everything. And some of the leading businessmen, like even Warren Buffett, I remember listening to an interview, he said, learn to say no when you have to say no. So how do you see this yes-no difference?
It's a really good question, because if you say too many yeses, you have no time. I can attest to that. But my yes is really a philosophy of getting comfortable doing things I don't think I'm ready for. And that's how I would think about it. And so I have absolutely said I said no to several things. But I think the ability to say no is really around focus and discipline. And as you are going through your schooling and you're going through your career, if you do truly say yes to every opportunity, there is no time to get focused and specialized and disciplined. And as you're progressing in your career, you need to be an expert at something. You really do. And it's funny because once you get, senior leadership and more into the C-suite, it's much more important about how strategic you are and how you manage people really well. But there's this period of time in your career where you need to be the subject matter expert, and you need to be the go-to. That's even better. You want to be the person that when someone has an issue or a question, like, oh, I'm going to call Lauren. She knows the answer to this. She'll figure this out. You want to be the Lauren. And so I think being really strict around how your time gets allocated and never giving up on this idea of you're always learning, and I'm sure that is said here at school all the time, is you're always learning. Everything is a learning opportunity. I think that carving out that time, saying yes to the learning, saying yes to that opportunity to meet someone who's really interesting and maybe you'll be able to stay connected to, that's a really good yes to do. Some of the other things, one of the things I always say, because you'll realize this once you're in the workplace, is that happy workplaces tend to celebrate things. And so you celebrate birthdays, you celebrate the holidays. And what typically happens is that somebody in the office has to be the one that gets the cards, gets the gift, orders the catering. And that's actually not a woman's job. However, most often, it is just assumed that as you're all sitting in the meeting and we're like, oh, we've got to celebrate, Bob's birthday next week, and nobody raises their hand to say they're going to order the cake and order the balloons and get the card. And it defaults to a woman, because women, we are really good at getting stuff done, and we also really care. We're generally, not that men don't care, men absolutely care, but women really care that that birthday gets celebrated. And so they're going to take it upon themselves. I tell young women who are just starting out, do not say yes to that. Absolutely do not. Even if you are asked if you'll order the cake and get the birthday card, say, no, I really think that my colleague, Mike, would be really good at doing that. And now Mike's not going to like that you did that, but he's absolutely not going to push back on it. That's the thing to remember. The other thing I say is don't be the note taker, no matter what your level is, unless that is directly what your functional role is. Do not take the notes during a meeting. Because if you are taking notes during the meeting, you are not engaged in participating in the meeting. And as a younger person starting out, you want to be speaking at the meeting. And even if you don't think you have anything good to say, you absolutely can ask a question. So you want to be heard instead of head down, writing everything down, and just being the one who captures it. That's a tough lesson to learn, because I used to be the note taker, which is why I probably feel so strongly about it, because I thought I was helping. I'm helping by taking all the notes. But if you're helping, you're not participating.
Such good advice. Very good. Do we have another question? Oh, there we go. Come on up.
Hi, I found your talk very inspiring. Thank you for that. And you had mentioned that there's a skill about bluffing, and it's about confidence, it's about what we say and how we say it. But I don't know if it's as girls or if it's the households we grow up in, we're reinforced to be honest, speak the truth, and nothing else. So for someone coming from that place, how do you build up on the skill of bluffing and using it only to your benefit and not to harm others? Because there's a follow-up question as to how to negotiate and still continue doing it after facing multiple no's. Because there's also, sorry.
Could you
please
say
go.
the follow-up again? I didn't quite hear that.
The skill of negotiation. There are times when I knew I deserved to be paid more, and I did ask for it. I did speak, and it did not go out the way I wanted it to.
Yep.
And it was with the same people over multiple occurrences where I had improved answers, but it still didn't go well. So do you think it could still be a room for improvement from my side, or it's just how the other people function?
Yeah, let me start with the second answer first before the bluffing question. So I have asked for things many times and been told no. So I know exactly how you feel. And as soon as we hear that word no, we tend to literally, physically just want to get out of the room. Like you actually don't want to engage anymore, and you definitely don't want to hear why you're being told no. But it is the why you're being told no. That's actually the more important question. Because if you can get the person who has the power to say no to articulate, why am I not getting what I've asked for? Because I've just laid out, because I know women, and what we do is we make a lot of bullet points about all the ways that we deserve something and all the accomplishments and all, the positive impacts, to the P&L. That's usually not enough. And so what I think it's the ability to stay in the room, receive the no, and then ask the more detailed questions. And you're asking the questions not to be antagonistic, not to be, carrying on the negotiation. You're asking the questions so you can learn, and then you never want to leave the room without getting a timeline on when to come back. So something like large companies usually have a very cyclical way of doing promotions and comp reviews. But in some smaller businesses, it's not really like that. It's not as structured. And you could say, okay, I've heard these 3 parts of the feedback. May I come back in 6 months? And we can have this conversation again. Because I still believe that I am worthy of this promotion, this raise, this change in role. When you ask those direct questions to your manager, it's very difficult for them to say, no, you can't come back. They're not actually going to respond that way. And you're showing an action step that you're both going to write it down on the calendar. Let's set the meeting right now. We're both here right now. Let's just set the meeting right now, 6 months from today, and get it on the books. And then you're going to work exceptionally hard to repair the things that they felt that you weren't ready for. Now, you come back in 6 months, and you still hear no. And you come back in 12 months, and you still hear no. And there are a lot of us that do experience that. One of the most difficult things to do is to fold your hand. And what I mean by that is sometimes where you are is not where you should stay. And if you continue to hear no after no after no, even though you have changed and you have done more and you have done better and you feel that you have truly met the marks to get what you're asking for, then it's time to start looking. And the start looking is always scary because, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. But if you are in a place that you just have had repetitive no's, you probably need to go elsewhere. Going back to the bluffing, so bluffing is withholding information. It is not lying. And it's really important to understand that definition because most of us are highly ethical and most of us don't want to be thought of as liars. But in a poker game, the ability to bluff successfully is done because you are able to withhold information. And the information is not just what's on your 2 cards, it's also in your physical behavior. It's in your tells. That you are not giving away information that gives someone else an advantage. If you can get comfortable with holding information and not, this happens so often in a negotiation, is you've got, let's say you have 6 points and you've really thought them through and you're just gonna fire hose those 6 points to start with, don't do that. Do 1 or 2 of them. Pause. The power of pause is fantastic. It's called checking in poker. It's the power of the pause in a poker game is a checking move. When you check your opponent in a negotiation, they have to respond. And that painful time, it could be 10 seconds, it could be a minute, waiting for them to respond to those first 2 points you made, then you can give them the next 2 points. Like, you never want to let the full hand out. You just want to do it turn after turn after turn. And let silence be a strength. It's not a weakness. I just did this interview where I said, the power of pausing and checking is probably one of the most underrated skills in the workplace, because we are so accustomed to responding immediately. You get a Slack, and you immediately write the answer. You get the email, and you want to be the first one to comment, if there's a chain of people on the email. You don't have to do that. It's not a race. You can just pause and check, gather all of your thoughts, make sure you have all your facts, and be really concise in how you respond. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes, I think many of our students have the same issue that you raised, that they, mom said never lie, and I don't want to let anyone down behind me, but everything that all of our speakers are telling you all today is about your future and about moving forward in power, moving forward with grace, moving forward into wealth without being ashamed of that wealth, and without being being the person who says, oh, I'll shrink and I'll let my brothers go forth. I'll shrink and I'll let others around me go forth. We want you to own your power. And thank you very much for everybody who's asking questions. And I hope you take what these fearless leaders are saying to heart, because they are walking their walk. They are not people who have not done everything that they're saying, giving to you today. So thank you very much, everyone. Awesome. Good. And we're going to shift gears. So there's water and snacks outside in the little bag, but we're going to shift gears to the presentation. I am not sure. I'm bad on timing. But I think we're doing good. 2:30? Awesome. We're doing good. Thank you.
I'm going to take us through, I thought a lot, because I love to teach poker, but I also recognize that none of us are sitting at the table right now, and those of you who have no familiarity, it can be a little challenging to just jump into a poker lesson. So what I'm going to do for about the next 10 or 12 minutes is really take you through thinking about risk, and then more specifically talking about one of what we feel is truly a secret sauce in poker, which is EQ and perception. And those skills translate so well from, one, winning the poker hand, but two, to really winning in life, and getting what you're hoping to get out of this conference, out of school, out of work. So we'll see. Hopefully we get this up and running. We might have there's a video, and I might need a little help with the video, but April, I think, has got it.
Yes, I am on it. I will shuffle for you, too, if you'd like me to.
I'll let you do that, only because I didn't realize I was going to hold the
Okay.
microphone too.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. So I told you a little bit about the TED Talk, and I don't want to go, I think we talked about it more than I thought we would, so why don't we go to the next slide. And I'm going to actually start by asking each of you a question. And the question is are you a risk taker? Now you can turn to your neighbor, the person behind you, and you can nod your head, or you can say no for just a moment. I always like to see what the reaction is when we ask this question. So the word risk is that, there's no wrong answer to this question. There's no risk in answering it, but the word risk means different things to each of us. And being comfortable with risk can be very situational. It can depend on the probability of a reward. And the next one. And you may even be willing to take a risk for someone else. You'll advocate for a child at school. Oh, fantastic.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Adrienne. That's another entrepreneur from another brilliant person who's living and walking the walk.
Appreciate it. Oh, that makes it much easier. Thank you. So you may even be willing to take a risk for others. You'll advocate for your child. You may even be able to fundraise for your favorite charity. And you're going to do that more easily than you're going to negotiate a raise for yourself or even launch a new product idea. And so the important question, and it's up here, it's not, are you a risk taker? The question really is, do you want to improve how you analyze and problem solve and take action so you can become a more courageous leader, a better decision maker, and more confident? And at Poker Power, we really believe that that answer is yes. And so here's what I've figured out about risk and leadership over the last 25 years, working on Wall Street, running startups, and what I truly think is riskiest of all is I have raised 2 teenage daughters. They're both here, they're both successful, so that was a real risk for me. But the best leaders, we can tolerate uncertainty, and we can be comfortable with ambiguity. We don't have to know all the answers, but we have to know the right questions to ask. And it's through taking these calculated risks again and again that we're able to learn from both failure and success. And we can pivot, we can adapt, and we can innovate. And it's getting comfortable with risk that helps us persevere past those roadblocks and really find the solutions. And as a startup leader, that is truly what I do every single day, is push through the comfort zones and try to find the solutions. So I can't lead this company without embracing risk-taking. But don't be fooled, because we definitely don't have it all figured out at Poker Power. As we scaled Poker Power, we were flying the plane as we built it. I feel like we're still doing that today. And we made a lot of mistakes. We overspent on social media agencies. We mishired on some vendors. Our first app, actually, we never got to MVP, and it didn't launch. And we created a curriculum in the early days that was too dense and it was too complex. It was really too overwhelming to learn. So I always say that, I am not selling a pretty lipstick on IG. A lot of people, I know when you have a product, you put it on TikTok, you put it on Instagram, and you're selling a product. That's not what I'm doing. I am trying to sell leadership, and I'm trying to sell empowerment. And I'm trying to sell it to half the world right now, many of whom have no interest in what I actually have to sell, which is this game. And I think really at the end of the day, what I'm doing is I'm selling a future vision of what the world ought to be. And what that looks like is on this video.
All right, let's go to the video.
What if women had a seat at every table? A seat in every classroom, every interview room, every boardroom. What if women sat at every table and played a game? A game that made them strategic, decisive, resilient, analytical, influential, unapologetic, and confident. What if this game was a game changer to change the stats? To change our stories? To change the future? This game is played at a table. Flip the table. Raise the stakes. Play to win. We saved you a seat. That game is poker. And the players? They're fearless. Poker Power. Join us.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's the sizzle reel. We play that sizzle reel at the start of every class, every corporate workshop that we do. And I still get a chill from that. I truly do, because I really think that that encapsulates how big the problem is that we're trying to solve, and also how exciting it is that we're doing it together, and we think we have landed on a tangible solution. But next slide. Research shows that we actually regret the things that we don't do much, much more than the things we did do, even if the results of those actions turn out poorly. And so as a leader, that startup mindset, it's really, really key to move past the barriers and the hurdles. And what I like to say is that at the poker table, which is really just like in life, is you're not going to be able to wait for the perfect hand to be dealt. It's not coming. And so if you keep waiting, then you're not sitting and playing. And if you don't sit, then you can't play. And if you don't play, you can't win. And we really do want to teach you how to win through playing the game of poker. So as you saw in our sizzle reel, there are 100 million people that play this game, and fewer than 10% are women. And that's recreational and professional players. So it's not me, it's not you, most likely. But with most things, what we know is that men aren't actually better at this game. They just tend to play the game in much greater numbers, and they usually start at a younger age. And it's been said that we don't decide our futures. We choose our habits. And it is our habits that will decide our futures. And so at Poker Power, we want thinking and negotiating and taking risk like a winning poker player. That's what we want to become your habit. And so to wrap up, I'm going to just take us through a bit of one of our lessons where we talk about perception and EQ. And it's really all around how to read your opponent's behavior at the table, and as well as how to learn to master your own behavior, because we all give off tells at the poker table, but in real life too. So as your learning progresses beyond lesson 1, you're going to develop 3 levels of thinking in poker. And this really correlates well to negotiation. So the first level is, what do I have? You are truly asking what 2 cards are in my hand, and do I raise them or do I fold them? It's very binary thinking. And if that's all you're ever thinking about at a poker table, you're not going to keep your chip stack for very long, I promise. But then we move on to level number 2 in poker thinking. And that's where you're going to ask, what do I have? So what's in my hand? And what could my opponent have? And that's when you start to shift your perspective and really think about the probabilities and the possibilities that could come out on the table that could beat you. Now, that's good if you can start to get to that step in a negotiation. But really where the secret sauce comes from is level 3. And that's where you ask, what do I have? What do I think you have? And what do I think you think that I have? And that's that ever-evolving complex logic and analysis. And if you can start to hone that skill through a game of poker, you're going to start to apply that to all the negotiations that you are in. So it's reading the tells, it's being patient and resilient. These are all some of the key leadership skills that we practice at Poker Power. And of course, we do a lot of betting and we do a lot of bluffing, because those are key skills to learn as well. So at its core, poker is a social game. So you don't play poker by yourself. And as with any social interaction, you have to start to categorize people's play. And what type of player are they? So on this screen, you'll see those quadrants. And we'll start up with the maniac. So the maniac is a type of player. And I'll be candid, I was a maniac when I first started playing, because I was aggressive and I just wanted to play a lot of hands. And that's a losing strategy, because the maniac just wants to be in every single pot, but they're actually not really caring about the outcomes. The fun for them in the game is just always playing their cards. Below the maniac is the calling station. A lot of people who play poker are what we call a calling station. They too want to be in lots of the hands, but they don't have any conviction. So they're really easy to navigate and maneuver around. In fact, you can push them around. And so you don't want to be the calling station either, because you're actually never getting all the way to winning the pot. You're just putting a lot of chips in, and you're not seeing the return from it. Next to that, we see the rock. And I always say that we have a lot of rocks in our Poker Power community. So women, when they first learn with us, is they're risk averse. And that's a very typical behavior, I described it earlier, is they're not comfortable pushing all the chips to the center of the table. The problem with the rock is that she's waiting for the perfect hand. She's waiting for 2 aces. And even if she gets the 2 aces, 20% of the time those aces lose. So the very best starting hand in poker is the pocket aces, which is 2 aces, and you're going to still lose 20% of the time. And so the rock doesn't win the pot either. So what are we all trying to get to? I'm not here yet either, don't worry. But but we're trying to be the professional. And these are our instructors. These are the women that lead our classes who've been playing poker for 20 years, and they have seen every hand that could ever come out on a poker table. The reason you want to be the professional is that you're looking to extract maximum value from your hands. And the way that you do that is through both betting and bluffing. It isn't just because you have the very best cards at every table. Okay, so once you understand your opponent's style of play, you can start to get advantages by recognizing their tells. And I'm going to guess that the word tell is very familiar to people. Usually you think of poker, you think of tells, you think of poker faces. But tells aren't just limited to a poker table. If you start to look for them, you're going to see them in any situation where there's conflict or stress. And so a tell in poker is really just a change in behavior. And it gives you insight into how your opponent is valuing their hand. Do they think they have a good hand, or do they think they have a weak hand? So here are some common tells that we see at the poker table, but also in real life, is that you'll notice a sudden change in behavior. So if someone at the table is really gregarious, they're talking, and suddenly they get dealt a hand and they go quiet. That is a significant change in behavior. Your job is to figure out, does that mean strength or does that mean weakness? And until you start to see a pattern of play, it's hard to decipher. But you've picked up on the initial tell, which is they're not behaving the way they were at the start of this game. Another one is that people who think they have the winning cards, they actually physically will put their hands closer to the pot where the chips are in the center. It's very subtle. You really have to look for it, but they're just subconsciously so certain they're going to win their pot, they're almost already reaching for it. So you want to look for that. And then we always say that honesty starts with the feet. Good poker players are very good at controlling a poker face. They're very good at not giving away tells above the table. But what I always say, and you can do this in negotiation too, is it's okay to, drop your phone, bend down, and check under the table. Are people tapping their feet? Are they crossing them and uncrossing them? Where can you start to see body movements that are starting to give you a sense of, do they feel good or do they feel like they have a weak hand? So there are the physical tells. And then, above all, it's the baseline behavior. Because you can't actually recognize a tell until you've studied someone long enough to know that something has changed. Now, this applies to the workforce, too. You work with your colleagues every day. You work with your classmates in the classroom. You want to be perceptive and paying attention to people's baseline behaviors so you know when they have changed. But you have to remember that tells go two ways, that as much as you might think you're not giving off a tell, you probably are. And one of the fastest ways to recognize others' tells is to actually recognize them in yourself first. So hand in hand, go to the next slide, is tilt. And tilt might not be as a familiar word to you, but tilt is a word in poker that is used to describe frustration. And it's usually the result of bad luck. So a tilted poker player will find themselves under what we call the amygdala hijack. And what that means is that the more rational part of your brain, the limbic part of your brain, has shut down because you're overwhelmed with emotion. Now here's what you need to know. Everybody tilts. So, tilt is just a deviation from your A game. And it's going to make you do things that you normally wouldn't or prevent you from playing your best. So I'm going to quickly go over a few of the different kinds of tilt that we see at the poker table. So the first one is called hate-losing tilt. And you probably know these people. So this is the person who is extremely competitive, and if they lose, they're going to get angry and be highly emotional at the table. And if you suffer this kind of tilt, you actually start to act even worse at the table. And so you start with hate-losing tilt, and it just starts to build on itself even more and more. That is not the winning strategy at the table. So this type of tilt is really destructive to have. The next one is mistake tilt. Now, some of you might recognize this one is that you start to beat yourself up as soon as you realize you've made a mistake. And instead of spending the time to think about why you made the mistake, you're so focused on the mistake that you can't do any analysis or logic around it. That's also a losing strategy at the poker table. You have to be able to fold your cards, get distance, get up from the table if you have to, and take a little bit of a breather when you make a mistake. And then lastly, there's entitlement tilt. Oh, sorry, two more. Entitlement tilt, this is a tilt that you feel because you feel you deserve to win. And I think, for high-achieving people, we go to the right schools, we do the right jobs or internships, we go after the right jobs, and we deserve that next thing, that next promotion, that next raise. We feel entitled. And in fact, if someone else wins our poker chips, we feel like they are less deserving and less worthy of having won. So if you feel that, you're the person that's going to call out someone else's mistake, you may be a person who has entitlement tilt. You're going to treat winning as a possession, and you're going to really get upset when someone takes it away from you. And the last one, and the most destructive one, is desperation tilt. And this is where you're going after the sunk cost. You've already put the chips in the pot, you've got a losing hand, you ought to be folding, and instead you shove all in. And that is the most destructive kind of tilt of all, is when you have lost all ability to be rational and logical and to really think logically at the table. So you're going to do things such as playing too long, playing in too many hands, and really being focused on having to get lucky in order to win. And poker's a game, there is luck in it, but poker is a game of skill. You can't just rely on the luck to win this game. So the moment that emotion seeps into our decision-making process, everything goes out the window. And I'm sure many of us have experienced this. We can't think clearly. When you're on tilt, as in life, whether it's poker or whether it's your job or whether you're at school, we want to stay the very best version of ourselves. And so, I have a few examples on how to do this. I was a junior Olympic coach for 8 years, and this was quite recent. And I had very talented, I had national championship runners. And one of the things I would tell them every race day is you have to control the controllable. And what that meant on a race course is you can control how you tie your shoes, you can control how you warm up, you can control what you eat that morning. But there's a whole lot of uncontrollable things on a race course, at a poker table, and in life. And it's everything from the weather. It's to the way the officials behave. It's to the shape and the line of the trail that you are running. You can't control those elements, and you shouldn't even be thinking about them. You just want to focus on controlling the controllable. So when the cards don't go your way, you have to give yourself permission to assess it really clearly and candidly, because it's usually not the emotion that's your weakness, but it's either you're ignoring emotion or you're overreacting to emotion. And it's really hard to play well if you can't be rationally thinking through why you are in a tilted state. And it's really difficult to admit that we're tilted. We don't actually like to know that we have this weakness of ourselves. So you want to evaluate the moment when you become compromised in a poker game, and you want to remove yourself. And you can stay at the table, but you want to do some deep breathing. I know we're doing box breathing, right? Later today, we're doing box breathing. Is fantastic. You can do that at a poker table. You might also have a word or a mantra that you say to yourself when you feel yourself starting to get tilted, so you can reset yourself. And these sound like small things, but they're really not, because if you don't prepare for being tilted, and I'm really not talking just about poker here, in life you are going to have so many circumstances that can really just flare your emotions. You want to have already thought through the way that you're going to deal with that. And unfortunately, when you don't plan ahead at the poker table, you're the person who very quickly is giving all their chips away to the better players. So the last thing I'll tell you is that competitive people forget that losing is a competition too. Everybody's going to lose, but you want to lose less and you want to lose better, which really means tilting less than your opponents. And the poker table is a really good place to start to practice and assess how do you handle losing. Because none of us enjoy that experience, but again, it's through the repetition and the honing of doing the analysis after the loss that makes you a better poker player, but it also makes you better able to handle the stresses in your own life. And sometimes it involves walking away. Walking away, folding your hand, that is not a losing strategy. And in poker, it's often a very disciplined and successful strategy. So it can show a significant sign of strength when you're able to walk away. And so I would just leave you with a little bit of a quote, which is, and it's one of my favorites, is that the difference between success and failure, it's not who has the better ideas and the better abilities. And I really do mean that. but it's the person who has the courage to act on her ideas and to take the calculated risk and to act. And I think that, through this conference and through the people that you're meeting, today is the day to start to act, because you deserve to be at the table. I want you to know you absolutely deserve to be at every table where you want a seat. And I want you to forget the stereotypes. I want you to forget the reasons you haven't taken your seat and ignore all your trepidation. And instead, I want you to take a risk. I want you to play the game. And I want you to bet on yourself. And with that, I'm just going to call, I think April's going to call up the screen. The next one. So if any of you are interested, one, please come this afternoon. Our teachers will get here just shortly after 5 o'clock. And we have 2 tables, and we would love to teach you the basics of the game. No money transacts, so don't worry about having to bring anything with you. And we expect you to know nothing. So it's a really safe space to learn, and everybody is welcome. You can bring your friends. Anyone is welcome at our table. If you would like to play on our app, I mentioned our app, you can just, there's the QR code. And what's great about our app is it's just for teaching and practice. So you can play against the bots. It's actually the most popular place in our app is people just want to practice and they don't want to be in a real game. They don't want anyone watching how they're playing. I think that's a very typical female characteristic, is let me get really good at it and then I'll show up. But you also can go through 14 learning modules that are each about 5 minutes, and you can learn all the basics of the game right there in the app. And then when you're ready, you can come to our community games that we have 3 times a day, and you can play with us. So thank you all. Thank you, April, and the other wonderful speakers. This has been really enjoyable.
Thank you.